Hello, everybody. Denisse and Nienke here. In this opportunity, we have gathered to go through the all of the material from Event 74, Day 1. It is quite a lot of material, a lot of material. So I'm gonna do my best to try to go over as much as I can. Nienke was there, of course, in the event. We went through it together. Um, and also during the event, we tried. I think what we managed to do is go over the first part of each day, right? But we didn't
Yes.
go over the whole thing. So, yeah, that's what we're gonna do today. Just review it and leave a mark here in English with this Dutch antenna over there in the Netherlands. So let's get to that. Okay, so the event happened the 6th, 7th, and 8th of 2026, La Cumbre, Córdoba, Argentina. So, like I said, we are doing day 1. Okay, so the first day of the event is the 6th of the 6th. And recently, Alejandra, every time she speaks about six or works with six, um, it is being related to the collective memory. Okay, so 6 of the 6 has to do with the collective memory, and this is the day where the event begins. The collective memory is important because it's what provides coherence to the third dimension. So memory is quite important. Thing is that it is not the only important thing. Okay. Um, okay, so event 74, we know that, and we have been working with this notion of plata wolframio, yeah, and we've been working with the periodic table of elements, and we've been working with this concept quite a lot. So event 74 is important for this reason because 74 is wolframio, and if we read 74, we can read it as the observer that is lighting the destiny, the observer lighting the way. Um, and it has to do with the wolframio because wolframio, one of the functions that wolframio is going to have is so that I do not lose the silver string. In Spanish, there is this concept of cordón de plata, which is silver string. Yeah, and it's used in the mystical situations, but I'm not very, I don't have it very clear what it means in the mystical, but I think it has to do with um, a specific type of internal connection, okay? But here we can argument this very technically. We can talk about the silver string, but the silver string is going to have the function um, pr to have a guide. That connection is going to have to do with a guide that we're going to have inside the collective memory. But who holds the other side of the string? That's going to be wolframio. So it has to do with orientation. Yes, we have wolframio from outside and we have plata from inside, the silver string. Okay. This example of I am going inside a cave. I tie a rope to my body, and someone else outside is holding the rope so that I don't get lost in the cave. Something like that. Um, so because the thing is, if we are inside a collective memory, we are always at risk of not sinking into the signal, if of losing signal, of losing Wi-Fi in a way, like losing Wi-Fi. So if we lose Wi-Fi, we lose how we orient ourselves inside the collective memory. So if that happens to us, we are at risk of being sucked in by the collective memory. Okay. So in the collective memory, what happens? Okay, if I don't have the Wi-Fi outside of the collective memory, I am at risk of being pulled around by the collective memory. If I am only connected to that, yes, what I'm going to have is a broad, an ample area of communication, like in ro, but I'm not going to have the ri. So 7 makes it so that 4 does not lose direction. And this has to do with the point in our connection, our own connection, that is very important inside a world that is not our own, because we are participating of a collective entorno that is not our own. So 7 with 4 has to do with this point of connection, my own connection, that is really important inside a world that is not my own. The world is the earth is going to be the editorial. I am going to have a carpet inside that editorial where I am going to be the author and I'm going to, in the end, publish a work. Yes, I am going to publish my something of my creation. And then when it is published, it becomes less of the author and it becomes more of the editorial. Okay. This is so that we start to gather on the fact that as a particle, I inject myself into an entorno. That entorno is going to provide the memorials that I am going to appropriate because uh, I need to have something that pulls me, that identifies me to this entorno. Yes, something that anchors me to the entorno. That's going to be the function of appropriating myself all of those memorials that the entorno provides. The thing is that I don't want to only identify with the memorials. I want to understand that these memorials have a function, but they are not mine. They belong to the editorial. Okay, so um, one thing that happens is that if we lose direction inside the unified field, um, of course, I'm not gonna be able to write anything new because I have no connection. So I'm gonna be able to do is to clone and clone and clone because all I have is the memorials. So I'm gonna take from the memorials and then just like hit refresh and do the same thing over and over again. Um, so the solar day, wait, yeah, the solar day of the first day of the event was 739775. Um, we have 577 here. So she makes reference to event 60 in Greece, where she opened this development of 5 with 7, 5 with 7 and 7, and 5 with 777, which for me, I have to go back and look at it more closely because it's not fresh. I mean, it was quite some events ago, quite some years ago. But it does have to do, of course, with the administration of the value, the administration of the value in three different instances. And of course, different instances because every instance is going to have a different logic. So this is why it's so important the differentiation of the of every instance and being able to differentiate the logic of every instance. Okay, so this is a solar day, and she's talking about the fact that the seven that we have a 7 with 9 and a 7 with 5. The 7 with 9 is the one that is supporting the update, and it is committed or compromised with the direction. 7 with 9 is supporting the update and is committed with the direction because we don't want to lose direction when we are getting updated. So there needs to be this support. And the other 7, which is with 5, has to do with the communication. The communication, because we're going to be administrating the consciousness of the update. Okay. Okay. Um, event 71 is the event where LGC is coming back. Oh, I just realized I'm not wearing my microphone, so you have better audio. Look at that. Is that good? Can you hear me? Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Event 71 is where LGC is coming back to presentiality from the pandemic. And the events in the first year of the apparatus were 71, 72, and 73. They were Asume gatherings, right? Asume gatherings. So, and right now we are in the Asimila. So we have events 74 and 75, and these are going to be the Asimila gatherings inside Aparato 507. Aparato 507 has a high opportunity, like the demands of apparatus 507 are going to have to do with a great capacity to restructure our gravitational logic. The logic that we use to administrate our anatomic projection inside the unified field or inside the anatomic field. So right now we are on year 2 of that, and every year, of course, in this apparatus is going to have a different task. 71 in Asume, 74 in Asimila. So we have event 71 in Asume, event 74 in Asimila, and here we can see all of the digits from the left side of the calculator. So we have 7, 4, and 1. This has to do with the receiver not losing direction. Not losing direction in the receiver is something that is not very easy to do. So this is a little bit of what we are working with in the events. Recovering or recognizing specific connections that we are having and describing them so that the receiver is more and more properly oriented inside its gravitational projection. Okay, so here I just named how the event was structured, right? There was Alejandra spoke for a couple of minutes, and then everybody was sitting with their own table, their own lap. And then after Alejandra finished speaking or providing with the topic, then we spoke amongst ourselves for a couple of minutes, and then that was the dynamic. So this event begins with this situation of AL, SI, and DO. AL had this little tag of volatility. Okay, it's going to be representing the volatile aspect of our antenna or multidimensionality is going to have one aspect that is very volatile, and then Do is going to be the aspect which that is going to be connected to the memorials. So when we are talking about our capacity to receive signals, identify the flow of signals, and then our capacity to communicate that, well, first we have to have this notion of differentiation of connection and communication, right? Because we can remain connected without having any capacity to communicate. Communicating is not necessary. It is better to keep a connection and to lose communication than to keep communication and lose connection, right? So we have this aspect that is volatile, and this is going to be. She spoke a lot about when LGC is Alejandra is describing something, and then in the minute we are like, yes, it's really clear, but then the minute that closes, we forget. That is volatility. Then when we move to SI, this is also this is like the middle ground, but the identification of that is imaginary construction. It's still internal, but it's beginning to have structure. Yes, the imaginary construction is where we begin to construct the structures that are later going to become materialized or expressed. So in the imaginary construction, we still have a lot of silence. It's like hard to bring it into communication. And then when we go to do, that means that there's more capacity to communicate. Okay, so this is what it begins with. And okay, Alejandra has vacant 41 in the event, which is very There's a lot of synchronicity there because we're talking about 7, 1, 7, 4, in the direction of the receiver, the destiny of the receiver. So she says, I know how hard it is to connect 4 with 1. Okay. And the thing is that in LGC, it is the subatomic scale, the one that is educating us, but it's educating in the Ri. And when we communicate this, we are traducing it to Ro. We are describing the education that we are receiving in the Ri axis. Because of course we are receiving the flow of signals is first, and then Alejandra comes because she's the one that's the best able to describe the signal. But we are all having contact with the signal. Okay. So in AL, we're going to have volatility. In SI, we're going to have imaginary construction. In DO, we're going to have communicable construction. Okay. So in AL, we are talking about many points that are simultaneous and turn on all together at once. Yeah. There's no cycles, everything's instantaneous. We have volatility. C is going to be that imaginary construction. The thing is that the observer needs a place to anchor itself. The observer needs a place to anchor itself. And that point of anchoring is going to be the position of the imaginary. But these are things that are going to remain being processed internally because it's a different kind of connection. Okay, it isn't still internal in that imaginary construction. The thing is that what we want to do here is that we want to first differentiate each one of those and then see how they work or not work together, or where they're not working, or where they're not syncing, or what is happening. It is like reasoning this just enables a different logical structure to activate. Yes, it is as if we are just designing the dots with this concept creation, and then the structure connects the dots. That's what is happening here. So we are integrating the concepts, and then those concepts become logical points that then the structure connects. Then she talks about every time she spoke about a topic or something before the lateralizations, she kept something like a question or something to remind or to put the person to think or to reason in case they couldn't do it on their own, right? So this is what she's explaining here. Here she's talking about the difference between the space-temporal structures and the structures of the people. The space-temporal structures are pornographic, meaning really obvious and evident and like completely transparent, because they are using a strict relation between sun and the earth. They use one same grid. So there's transparency. Different from people. People are each going to have a different structure. We're all going to have different structures. That's why we work so much with the other one who is not myself, right? I map myself and I map the other one who is not myself. Because every single person is going to have a different structure, because there is the scope that the species has, right, is going to come with an extra structure that we all need to read and identify. Yes, it is like we want to read each other's connection and processor. And then she goes on to talk about that, like the difference between describing how I process and describing the person. So separating those two things, because it's going to be different, of course. If I'm not describing my processor, I have to know also where I can do this, of course. Like when we are, if we are communicating in an entorno that shares a conceptual base, in the case of the LGC community, we share a conceptual base. This is a good place to describe my processor. But I can't go into society and try to describe my processor to a regular human that doesn't care about any of this. So there, maybe I can work on describing my person. Whatever, I can do all kinds of configurations there, but the important thing here is to separate one from the other. It's not the same thing. So what I want to learn and I want to exercise is to describe my own structure, to describe the way that I myself process. This is like the purpose of lateralization, which is very important. Here she's just mentioning how on the first 13 years of the development, everything was very free, very chaotic, but now we have entered the second 13 years and we have entered the scenario of the unified field. So we're talking about more regulations, about putting to the test everything we have learned these first 13 years, training ourselves inside segments, learning how to administrate segments, because we are dealing with a scale that is extremely volatile. So if we don't pay really good attention and give it the treatment that it needs, we lose it. So this is why all of these regulations, structures, segments, administration of all of this is so important. That's the reason. Mm, okay, the social version of the table. We spoke about this. Yes, we spoke about this in that video that I made of the periodic table, right? So I just put it here again. This is like the way it was. We had 18 columns here in the main table, and we have 14 columns outside. This affects the criteria of stability of our materialized experience, because the periodic table of elements is the matriz of structuring of the materialization that we all know. That's like the matrix of the matriz of materialization. So the way that it was arranged wasn't very honest, we could say. It wasn't very honest. There was like a trick in there to manage it in a different way, like rearrange the board so that someone else could use it, so that someone could use it the way they wanted. Because of course, who was gonna notice this thing? Only a subatomic consciousness and a solar consciousness was gonna be able to identify something like this. So the first thing that we do is that we censorate the table, which is what happens when we censorate the table, we get this, right? This is what happened. And the full table finished because we constructed the table step by step since 2023. So this is like the finished. When we look at it like this and then we jump to this, it's like, whoa. It's like, oh no, that's a lot. But it is all argumented. Of course, it's not just arbitrary. Okay. Here is a very interesting concept that I think we're gonna like a lot. And is this thing of the member of the species and the especial. Especial, of course, is special, right? But in Spanish, it makes more sense. Especie y especial. When we are talking about a member of the species, only member of the species, that does not have this extra scope, conscious extra scope, because in a way, the connection is always there, because the primary unfoldment never loses connection with a particle. What happens is that there are some particles that prefer to identify as only members of the species. So they don't identify with the source. They stop identifying with the source. So they can no longer use primary resources because they disidentified and not recognize the source. So that is going to make them only connected to the memories. Yes. But when we're talking about the especial, that's going to be a member of the species that's going to have this extra scope. And the thing is that the members of the species are predictable because, of course, they are connected to something from the past. They operate only through some things that have already occurred. They have no anticipation. They are not connected to the possibilities of the future. They're only connected to what already has happened. So they are not going to be bringing something new in there because they lost that primary connection. But the especial, the special, it's gonna have the capacity to add new things because it's recognizing this primary source. So it's gonna be having access to primary resources. So the especiales are not predictable, while the members of the species are quite predictable. So the species is now going to be dominated by the especiales because they are not very predictable. So yeah, the first movement of the table is to make it honest. Make that table honest. And the first movement, of course, we know was to do this. Just put everything in its place. And what LGC is proposing is the recovery of the spatial consciousness. This is like, if we want to assign the concept to its most precarious form, when we're talking about the table, it's going to be this table in black. The table in black has to do with the initiation in the recovery of the spatial consciousness, recovering the spatial conscious. Because it is as if we have been functioning through a temporal configuration, temporoespacial, not space temporal, but temporal spatial, which is only a time coming to write something on the space and leaving, but not having this spatial consciousness of the space. So what happens is this is a trap. This is an entrapment. Looking at the table like this is an entrapment, because if we reason the fact that they left 18 columns in the main table and kept out 14, the destiny of the receiver is outside. Like, it is as if the receiver is not gonna have any orientation or any say in its own destiny, and it's gonna be trapped inside a time, 18, right? There's a time, and it is an entrapment there, like an entrapment of particles in a way. So when we reorganize this and rearrange it and pass it through the local code, which is the solar code, because this is not, we're not talking about villains moving around a board and like just doing bad things with us. No, no, no. We're just talking about the state of the code of the star in a specific time of its development. Other consciousnesses that took a hold of that code because they could, because the possibility to do it was there, so they took it, and then they moved it around so that they could use it, but they never had the key of Sol. So what we're doing now is that we are passing all of the code through the Código Solar, through the solar key. Yes. So now the new table is a new board that is under the key of Sol. We have the local code. Yes. So now, hopefully, this brand new structure is going to lower very much lower, and the influence, the external influences, lower them, but also generate a space where we can properly see them and do whatever we need to do with them, but not having them come directly into our like directly. No, we're gonna have all of these instances like buffer. It's like a buffer so that when we are receiving all these influences from the external part of our solar system, it's not as aggressive. Okay. So scientists are in charge of the physical elements. We are in charge of the conceptual space, the creation of the concepts that are later going to have an affectation in the functioning or the role of the element when it's already materialized. So it's like previous steps, of course. So here we have the table full of nothing. This is an important differentiation that we must all have. It is not an empty table. It is a table full of nothing. Because if we say empty table, our minds are going to want to fill it up with something. But if it's already full of nothing, it means that it's full of the observer. The observer is going to provide the hosting to whatever is going to be the content of that later. But first we have this matriz of 224 spaces full of nothing. So here, this is also something new that she presented, which is the criteria of stability and the criteria of density. Because what we do keep in the table is the order that the scientists use to arrange the elements, right? Because it has coherence in the sense that we are talking about on the left we have the most reactive elements, and on the right we have the most stable elements. So when we are moving this way from left to right, we are going to be talking about a criteria of stability in our matriz of materialization. Criteria of stability. And then when we are moving from the first line and down, the level of the hydrogen and the helium and the promises and down, that's going to be a criteria of density. Here she mentions something that really has been a good resource for me. And she said, my central nervous system responds to my framework contract. So that has really helped me understand because I have had a lot of problems with my central nervous system the past few years. And now I can identify that the things that my central nervous system reacts to are going to be expressions of my framework contract. So now I can use that notion and be like, okay, now I can get to understand and know my framework contract and what it's all about, like begin to understand it. So we're all good. All of our central nervous systems are going to be reactive to different things and stable to different things. Uh-huh. So here we have another differentiation of the member of the species and the member of the universe. The member of the species, because it is tied and identified with the memories of the container and the container only and the species only, the most critical thing that they have is the neurology, because that's like where it stops. They have no access to anything more than that. It's like really short, right? It's like neurology and instinct and the past. And that's basically in the context. So it's like it's a really short circuit where they function, like a really short circuit. But when we're talking about the member of the universe, the determination is logical. So there is an extra reach that is not neurological. So here is very important because if we identify and differentiate these two notions, we're going to be able to be like, I don't have to take my neurology, my member of the species, human neurology, to process a logic that is not from the configuration that is used in there. It's something else. So I don't want to take my neurology there because it's just not going to work. I don't have to take it because we are working with resources at the scale of the universe. Mm. Here Alejandra starts to show this video that she showed us of the sun moving across the universe and the planets moving around with it. So what happens here is that the planets keep an algorithm in relation to the sun, and the sun keeps an algorithm in relation to the expressed universe. Okay, so we have this relativity between the planets and the sun, and then we have this relativity of the sun with the expressed universe, right? It's a very specific algorithm that they are, well, indirectly, we are also following this algorithm of the expressed universe, but through the Earth and through the sun. So it's indirectly. But see how different it is when we argument these things logically than when we just say, "Oh, we are all stars." No. I mean, we do have a connection to the stars, but we have to argument that connection because if not, it just gets filled up with all these whatever contents. Um, Okay, so the criteria of stability and criteria of density. We also discovered in the event that conciencia espacial, which is spatial consciousness, adds up to 149. 149 is the first um, the first space in black of the table. Conciencia espacial. So it's very, how can I say, like very accurate because the spaces in black have to do with a spatial consciousness. And conciencia espacial, it's up to 149. Well, um, foundational space. That's what we call it. Yeah, the first foundational space. First foundational space. And something else that it's extremely coherent is that how many spaces in black do we have in the table? We have 76. 76 is the foundational pattern. It's like really extreme, really extreme. Okay, so now we're talking about the criteria of density. Criteria of density um, has to do with there's a particle that wants to have a material existence, wants to go to the third dimension. So the criterias of density have to do with everything that's in the middle. Yes, from the particle to the anatomic insertion inside an anatomic field. That's going to be that. Um, when the consciousness is special and not of the species, it is especial y especie. When the consciousness is special, um, this is a particle that has gone through from antimatter, from the primary unfoldment into the secondary unfoldment. But once that particle is inserted, we're talking about a especial, conciencia especial, special, not of the species. Goes through the primary unfoldment from the antimatter, and then once it's inserted in a field, there's an intention. Like there's a particular intention that doesn't necessarily have to do with the problems that are recorded inside that entorno. Yeah. Um, so there's going to be a difference in the configuration of certain occurrences that are implemented inside the field. So we have that especial and espacial. If we have this especial consciousness, we are going to be able to alter the patterns that the Earth has. Yes, because there is this reach. A single particle can do something like that. But we are talking about subatomic level consciousness. We are talking about a member of the species that has this profile in the subatomic instance and has appetite in development of consciousness at a subatomic level. So this kind of profile is going to have these types of licenses. Yes, of course, if the consciousness is up to the level. If the consciousness is not up to the level of course, these licenses are not going to be enabled. Okay. So my membership to the universe is prior to my membership to the species, right? So yes, I am born and I appear in this entorno assigned to a species. And that species is going to have all these restrictions, yeah? Restrictions applied because those are the reaches that the entorno provides, yeah? It is what is provided, so it's going to have these restrictions. But if I have a membership that is prior to the species, then I have this special role, and there I'm going to have different kind of licenses. So I'm not going to feel as restricted down here as if I was in a can of sardines. I am going to have this extra, and I'm going to be able to assist myself when I am in there. So the thing is that if I am not identifying with the source anymore, I am not interested in developing consciousness at a subatomic level, then of course the subatomic level is not going to be assisting me. I'm not going to be able to use primary resources to whatever issues I face over here. Yes, I have, because okay, I am projecting myself in here. I have a specific intention prior. My intention of coming is prior to the problems that I am going to find in here. So it's another level. It is two different scales of purposes. Another clarification or reminder, because it's not new, is that the mental territory works for the consciousness works for the occurrence, and the body likes repetition. So if you give the body repetition, you're going to find its best responses. Mental territory should work for the consciousness. The thing is that it happens that we let our bodies define our minds when it shouldn't be. It should be the other way around. Because if the mind is working for the consciousness, if the consciousness is in this scalar growth, then my mind is going to be working for the consciousness to structure that, to functionalize my consciousness. And then the mind is going to be able to assign new, not assign, but like install new attributes to the body so that the body can put them and work better in the unified field. But we do have to have all these spaces properly differentiated so that they properly work and function better. So yeah, the mental territory and the consciousness should always be working together. So here we are going to go directly to my favorite part of day one. Honestly, this was a beauty, and only only the people that resonate are gonna understand this, because if so, I always say this, like if someone finds this video and looks at it and sees us looking at this and being like, wow, this is wonderful, they're gonna be like, you're so strange. But it's really wonderful. It's so coherent. And I feel so happy because it's the family, it's a planetary family. One time in a very brief conversation, I spoke to Ale about the sensitivity that I have with nature and the trees specifically, because of course I like animals, but specifically I have a very a high sensitivity for nature. So I spoke to her about that, and she was like, "But Earth is not alone. Earth has her family." That's what her response was. I've been working with this notion. I'm not here to save the earth and all of that, like that narrative that is shared in society, like, oh, we have to save the earth. No, we don't have to save the earth. We have to begin to create this spatial consciousness, which is very different. But yeah, that's what she said. She was like, Earth has her family. Like she's not alone. She's being assisted. So I was like, okay, okay. That depressurized me a little bit. So yeah, what we have here is what we are calling the digital construction of the solar system, which is a brilliant thing, a brilliant thing. We know, and we have been working with this quite a lot, that the value of the apparatus is going to be this 4-year construction that includes 3 regular years of 365 days and 1 secular year, secular? No, sorry, leap year or año bisiesto, that's going to have an extra day. So if we add 365 3 times and then 366, what we get is 1461, which is the value of the apparatus. Now, several years back, we also found that if we added Planeta Mercurio, Planeta Venus, Planeta Tierra, Planeta Marte, all of the names of the planets with their last name, Planeta, we get 1461. So just beginning there and like taking that in again because we've been working with this, but sometimes just it just gets more pornographic and more clear and more you know, every time I look at it, it's like that. So here we have this incredible convergence because remember, space-temporal structures use one single grid. So that's why this is extremely convergent and extremely transparent as well. So what we are doing here, everything that we do conceptually, all the work that we do with the concepts is so that our antennas are calibrated and so that we are able to provide the treatment to the flow of signals that it's necessary to provide. Yes, we are providers of service to the flow of signals. That is why we are working with the concepts. That is the reason. So what is 1461? Is what we have so that we are able to synchronize with the different frequencies of the solar consciousness. The different frequencies of the solar consciousness are going to be, of course, its 9 orbitals. The 9 orbitals of the solar system are going to be the different frequencies of the solar consciousness. Okay, so some of these frequencies are going to be extremely physical. Some of these are going to be extremely not physical. Okay, so how do we gather or come into contact with the frequencies that are not physical? Working on our belonging to a scale that is different, which is the subatomic. Through this recognition of this primary instance, we start to gain access to consciousness of another level. Yes, we start to come into contact with frequencies that are not physical. Yeah, so Ale says, Alejandra, the member of the species, is not very brilliant. But what is brilliant is the education that Alejandra is receiving. Yes, that is the brilliant part. The signal, the educational signal is brilliant. And we are receiving a really, really highly integrated education, highly civilized education, highly elegant. And she says, what you are seeing here is the progress in the algorithm of the member of the species that is Alejandra. So this is really great, honestly. This is really great to just differentiate, have this capacity and this clarity to be able to differentiate the signal from the member of the species that is being educated, right? And we can, of course, if we have resonance with the signal, we can separate it and be like, oh, it is the signal, the one that's brilliant, not me. The signal is educating me. And maybe I can become brilliant sometimes, but I am learning. Yeah, I am the one that is being educated. So let's not confuse who's the brilliant aspect and who's the one that's being educated, because that keeps us on the ground. Okay, so we're going to begin with orbital 1, which is Mercurio. Planeta Mercurio 1 is 177. If we add those two words. And we have just passed through this position in Calendaria and on the table, which is position 177, which is day 1 of lap 12. That is the first day of lap 12, 177. And that's what Planeta Mercurio is. So if we read 177, we can say that it is what activates the consciousness of the receiver. 177 is what activates the consciousness of the receiver. 177. And what we're talking about is the second 11 laps. The second 11 laps are the ones that activate the consciousness of the receiver. Because if this doesn't happen, then I'm going to be using the function of Planeta Mercurio to just go around myself and be like, oh, I'm so perfect and I'm so pretty and my code is perfect, but I am not integrating any other matrix that is not my own. Yes, so it is like I am in a I am living in a room full of mirrors, in a mirror house. Yes, I am only looking at myself and all I get is my reflection. So it's like, oh, I'm so pretty, I'm so perfect. But if the other thing happens, when we have the activation of the consciousness of the receiver, which has to do with the second 11, the beginning of the second 11 laps, which is where I start to open space to actually register the other and not just make projections of myself on the other. Projections, projections, projections of myself. And I never create the space for the other person. So that's what I want to do. I want to open the space for the other person and actually read the person and actually hear the person and register the person where the person is because I am actually interested. I'm really actually interested in the other person's structure. Okay, so that's kind of like the function of Planeta Mercurio. You know, it has this double way. And then we have Planeta Venus, which adds up to 155. And this is also something that Ale has been talking about. The fact that Venus takes longer to circle around itself, to rotate around itself. It takes longer than the time it takes to go around the sun. So the reading of Alejandra of this is that the second orbital is constipated because so many functions, external functions, have been injected into the second orbital that it's congested. Like it's hard for Venus to get through that, to gather all of that, because it's like so much stuff in there. So hopefully with this new administration and new code, we can help Venus rotate uh, less, become less constipated. Okay, so what happens here is very, very extremely technical. Okay, very, very technical because what we do is we have the digital construction of the solar system. So what we have when we add all of those planets and all of those last names, we get 1461. But we want to find functions of each orbital. But what we're going to do here is we're going to begin in Pluton, which is the intention or the like, it is a purpose that is going to be convergent. It's a purpose that is going to be convergent, but it's going to have a structure too. It is not an update that's going to come and destroy everything. No, it's an update that's going to be contained. So we're going to begin from Pluton. Pluton, all of that is 1461. Okay, so if we remove Planeta Pluton adds to 173. If we remove to 1461, 1673, we get 1288. This is what we're going to be doing until we reach Mercury, okay? So from 1461, we remove 173. We get 1288. The reading of this is because we subtracted Pluton, I don't like to say Pluto. If we subtracted Pluton, we are standing on Neptuno, on the 8th orbital. We subtracted Pluton, we are standing on Neptuno, which is the 8th. So the reading of 1288 is Neptuno has its own protocol of chaos and control in relation to the external source. Okay? Neptune has its own protocol of chaos and control in relation to the external source. Okay, now we're going to subtract Neptuno. So now we subtracted Neptuno, which is the 8, and we're going to stand on 7. What do we get? 1108. The reading of that is Urano, which is the 7th orbital, the planet on the 7th orbital, validates updates in the context up until the place where Neptune enables it. So Neptune is going to determine the context where Uranus is going to validate the updates. Okay, so here she says, liberty or freedom has a scope, and we have to respect that scope. Yeah, we're gonna have, but like I've been reasoning this, it's not the same to talk about liberty inside the regulations and limitations of the species than to talk about regulation and liberty in the context of the solar system. It's not gonna be the same thing, of course. Okay, so now we're gonna remove Urano and we're standing on Saturno. When we remove Urano, we get 965. The reading of this is Saturno allows the updates because we're talking about Saturno is 6, Urano is 7. So Urano is validating the updates that have a scope, but then Saturno is going to allow those updates only if they can be supported by the memory of its system, of the system. Because when we talk about Saturno, we always talk about system. 6-0, we talk about system. Okay, so Saturno is gonna see how it becomes more and more structured, like the update takes form and it begins to respect the scopes and the structures of the local system. Okay, so this has to do with the safekeeping, the internal safekeeping of the memories of the system, the solar system. Okay, so now we're gonna remove Saturno. Saturno is 6. We're gonna remove it and we're gonna stand on Jupiter. What we have is 781. And this reads as Jupiter controls the 4th cardinalities of the space because we have 7, 8, and 1. Espacio is 71. 8 is a synchronization of the 4th cardinality. So Jupiter controls the 4th cardinalities of the space. Now we find another type of restriction or regulation, we can say, because this has the function of administrating space-time. 781, the administration of space-time. We have space and we have time. 781. Okay. Okay, now we remove Jupiter and we get 607. We're standing on Mars. We remove Jupiter and we get 607. The reading of this is Mars allows me to add new instants to the system where I can establish new destinies. 7 with 6 is the foundational pattern. And she says, Mars allows me to add new instants to the system where I can establish more destiny. Because when we're talking about 4 has to do with the destiny of the 3rd dimension or the argumentation of the 3rd dimension. Mars is what's going to argument the 3rd dimension. Okay, so we remove Mars. We are on Earth. We remove Mars and we get 477. And we read this as, we need to have consciousness of the destiny in Earth to see how we are going to be documenting. How are we going to be documenting? In order for us to document, we need to have consciousness of the destiny of Earth. Okay, so Earth consumes destiny through the consciousness. 477. It's very coherent. Okay, now we remove Earth and we have Venus. And what we have is 332. So Venus provides the circuit that is the adequate circuit that we can use in all of the Earth according to the Earth. Venus provides the circuit for the Earth according to the Earth. 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 2. Okay, we need a circuit that is specifically generated for the Earth. And then we remove Venus, we are on Mars, on Mercury. Again, we're back on Mercury, so we have 177. We're back there. So yeah, that is what we call the digital construction of the solar system. I love it. I love it. I love it. Um, so in the end, this is what we get. Planeta Mercurio 71 plus 106. 106 is also the 106 spaces that we added on the table, like the 30 spaces of the promise and the 76 spaces, the foundational spaces. If we add those things, we get 106, which is the reading of that is the solar agenda, meaning that we are now under and using the codification that is local in clave de sol. So there's a solar administration now. Like the external influence is going to be managed in a different way. Okay. So the reading of this as we close is Mercury supports the consciousness of the receiver when everything is broken or failing. When everything is broken or failing, Mercury supports the consciousness of the receiver. So this is like a really great support. This is like finding an uncle that helps you out when you can't do it yourself. It's like, oh, Uncle Mercury, can you help me? I don't like, I think things are breaking right now. Mercury's like, yeah, I got you. Okay. Now here we have the icon of event 74, which is the little heart. Yeah, everything is like an open heart and open everything because everything is like out on the open. It's like really open, really out there. Okay. And this is in contrast to this and this, right? Because this is I show but I don't see, and this is I see but I don't show. And here is I see and I show. Both. Okay. This is another amazing thing that I also loved from the event is that, okay, now that we have argumented the construction, the digital construction of the solar system, we have argumented that. Now we are going to find these frequencies because when we add all of these planets and their last names, we get 1461. But also 1461 converges with the value of an apparatus. So what we're going to do is we're going to find these frequencies inside the apparatus, in the dates inside the apparatus. So here's what we have. Because we're talking about an apparatus, we're going to find different planets in different years. So because we are now in year Asimila, yeah, you want to say something?
No, it was by mistake. Sorry.
Oh, okay,
I
okay,
made a close up. It
okay.
was my
That's fine.
telephone.
Okay, okay. Okay, so because we are in year Asimila, the planets that we are going to be working with, like, because this is a route. This is a route. So think of it as a path that we are going towards and through. And right now we are close or in the middle between Planeta Marte and Planeta Júpiter. Yeah? Because we are between the 22nd of April and the 30th of August. But we can find these frequencies all over the apparatus, all through the apparatus, right? And we can see each one here, each of the 9. We can go find them in the apparatus. And of course, the last one is the 31st of October, which is we can find Planeta Plutón. Wait. Yeah, 1461 is going to be, of course, the last day of the apparatus, which is day 366. On apparatuses that are not secular, of course, because secular apparatuses do not have this extra day, this extra 366th day. Here she shares a flow of signals. And it's just like any other flow of signals that we are used to, right? A person asking for the address of the hotel where the event is going to be taking place. We have just come from this flow of signals of Rivadavia and 577 and the robo celular and all of that, right? And then, of course, we have seen this that the address for the event is 25th of May of 525. 525 is the next secular apparatus, which contains year 2100. Right? So this is just like a regular flow of signals, simple flow of signals. But what I want to rescue from this is how Alejandra is always teaching us and how she's always able to divorce the event that triggers the flow of signals. Because the robo celular, like, okay, Alejandra's phone was stolen, but look at the capitalization that was able to be learned only because Alejandra was able to dissociate the stealing of the phone, dissociate that, and then just focus on the spatial consciousness and the flow of signals. Okay, so this is what I think is most important from this. Being able to dissociate the situation that generates the impact, let it go, and focus on that other part so that I am able to provide support to the flow of signals. This is what I rescue from that. The signals are hyperconvergent. How are you feeling? Do you want to take a little break or do you want to just go?
Um, Go to the toilet and get some water. That will be good. So a break, but not
Okay,
too long, would be good.
like 10 minutes?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, okay. Let me just pause the. Okay, so we are back. So yeah, we were talking about the signals and the hyperconvergence of the signals. Yeah. Um, so talking about the key of Sol. If I go into the field through the key of Sol, I am going to have perpetual assistance, permanent assistance. If I have interest and I am busy with this construction and appetite, and I have clave de sol, I am going to have perpetual assistance. But the opposite of that would be to have only LLA credentials. That's going to be completely the opposite because instead of having perpetual assistance, I'm going to have like all these wishes and yearnings and wants that I am going to ask. I want the universe to provide them for me. But I just want them to be provided. I don't care about the construction of any of it. I just want to call it and have it delivered to my door. So that's like LLA credentials. The thing is that if I am working on this whole law of attraction, setting, it's like I attract what I want, la 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 la. Yes, you might attract what you want, but what you're not gonna see because you are only in your preference and in your bias like this, and you're attracting something, you are not going to see whatever you are attracting is carrying with it. Because a unified field has an equilibrium to keep. It has so many variables that it needs to keep the balance of things. So if I'm playing around with the magnetism of the field and attracting things towards me that I want, but I am not using my radar and I am not knowing that there's an algorithm that needs to keep balance, I'm not going to realize that whatever I'm attracting is going to carry a lot of stuff with it. The difference with entering the field with clave de sol, I am fractalizing because I am using the criterias of density. Yes, the criterias of densification, if I'm using those, once I arrive to the last link, I arrive synchronized. Different from that, if I just throw myself in there, I am dragged around by anything and I drag around whatever I can find. Okay, so now we have argumented the digital construction of the solar system, and now we're gonna argument the analogic construction of the solar system. Now, the main difference between this is that one is a frequential, a connection that is through frequency, and the other one is a connection that is through the physical aspect of the solar system, which means how many days does the Earth take to go around the sun? How many days does Mercury take? And all of the planets in the ninth orbitals, how many, because we are relativized to the third orbital, we're gonna use the metric of how many earthly years it takes for another planet to go around the sun. Yes, because in the other planet, that's going to be a Plutonian year, a Mercurian year, a Martial year. But here we are going to use the reference of the earthly year, which is 365. That's going to be the analogical construction of the solar system, different from the digital construction of the solar system, which is frequential. Okay, so what do we call the analogic construction of the solar system? What is it? Like the definition that Alejandra gave specifically is, this is the perception of the fact that Sol moves and that the planets have a relative position around the sun. So how does that help us? If we are able to dissociate and differentiate the digital construction from the analogic construction. That's like the most precarious part of the concept is the differentiation between those two things. So of course, if I am putting enough focus or attention to my digital aspect, I am going to be able to create solutions to whatever, or create this protocol of chaos and control to whatever is happening analogically. If I am actively working on my digital aspect. Because if I am not taking the registrations that I need to be, documenting, because I have to accept what is failing. I have to accept what is failing in order for me to create an improvement. Okay, so we have this other notion of ocurriendo. Ocurriendo is present, whatever is happening, and ocurrido, whatever has happened. So for example, once we are inside the event, we're there, it's ocurriendo, it's in the now. And then we use that as a reference when it's finished. It's evento 74 ocurrido. Now, when we are working in the ocurriendo, in the now, we are working with the genius. When we are working with the ocurrido, we are working with the wise. The thing here is that, of course, both things need to be synchronized in order to maintain balance in this anatomical projection. And the focus lies in the interface. I don't know if that's the right word, interfase. Like the middle ground between the ocurriendo and the ocurrido. Okay? Like the pivotal point between ocurriendo and ocurrido. Okay, so the digital construction of the solar system have assigned every single of those words and last names, Planeta Mercurio, blah, 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 blah. Those have values, and those values are frequencies. Okay, so this digital construction is going to have to do with the capacity to create sintonía. I need the specific word, yeah. This digital construction is going to be the capacity to create a tuning into a specific frequency. It's going to give me the capacity to tune into a specific frequency. It is as if we are tuning our antennas. Okay. Now, this invention of the table full of nothing, a table full of nothing. We worked a lot with this notion of recognizing this invention as proper and not appropriated. Proper in the sense of mine. So we need, all of us need to be sharing this occurrence of the invention of the table full of nothing. We need to be sharing it in terms of primary unfoldment. Yes, in terms of the source. If not, there will not be a capacity to create a collective culture. Yes, a solar culture. We need to share these occurrences, of course, the table full of nothing, at the in terms of primary unfoldment, so that we are able to create a collective culture, a solar collective culture. So each particle, this is a collective of particles. Sol is a collective of particles, and each particle needs to be able to sink into this invention as our own and not as something that I appropriated. So this is like something that is very big from the event. So this is where Alice says, if Alejandra is able to describe it, but if this hadn't occurred to us, we wouldn't be there. We wouldn't be here. Okay, so we need to have this recognition, the recognition of the invention of the matriz, and share it in terms of primary unfoldment, so that we are able to create a collective culture. So now we are going to the solar day of the 25th of May of 2100, which is the next secular year. 25th of May of 2100 is what we gathered from the flow of signals of the address of the hotel where Event 74 took place. So what we find there is the solar day, which is 766791. So we have 7 with 6, which again is the foundational pattern. And we have 91, which is orbitals from 9 to 1. So what we're doing there is we are adding space to the collective memory, because we are using the system of materialization of our star in a proper way in relation to our architect, and in an appropriated way in relation to Sol. Appropriated way in relation to Sol, because Sol is a collective of particles. So there is where the function of appropriate should be used. And all of the other cardinalities, the function should be proper of my own. So I am going to use these notions properly, meaning my own in the architect, this quality of this particular quality. And then when we are dealing with the collective, that is where it becomes appropriate. Because we are dealing with a collective, okay? It's not just me. Okay, so here we're gonna do kind of like the same thing that we did with the have this routing of each planet, but now we're gonna do it analogically. The first one we did was digital construction. This is analogical construction. So this one is 11. Okay, so Mercurio takes 88 terrestrial days to go around the Earth. Venus takes 225. Earth 365. Mars 1.88 years. Jupiter 11.86 years. Saturno 29.4 years. Urano 84 years. Neptuno 165 years, and Pluton 248 years. Now, a lot of people were like, why didn't she use the days? Why didn't she continue to use just how many days it takes, terrestrial days it takes for each planet to go around its orbit? And the reason for that is because she focuses on this. She focuses on the orbit of Pluto, because that's where, like, after we do the analogical construction of the solar system, we're going to talk a lot about Pluto and its orbit. So that's the reason why. Um, so here we have 88 days, which reads as Protocol of Chaos and Control. And then Venus has 225 terrestrial days. So 225 is the day after we finished going through the foundational spaces on the table. And this aligns to lap 15. And lap 15, we know that it has a different routing in Calendaria. It is no longer horizontal, it becomes vertical, and it changes, like from day to day, it changes to a different level of the table from day to day. So here's what Alejandra says, like starting from lap 15, it is as if we ran out, like we are finished using the matriz, and now we have to use our wings. It is like we only have to use our antenna. So she says, it is as if the little bird comes out of the nest and it doesn't know it can fly until it's falling. So that's quite nice. So yeah, she talks about, she doesn't develop it too much. She talks a little bit about China, but it's not very relevant to what we want to get to, which is Planeta Plutón, which is 248 terrestrial years. Okay. This is like the most important thing, or not the most important, but like the most developed on the event. We worked a lot with the orbit of Pluto. The orbit of Pluto is what we call, it's also called trans-Neptunian, because the orbit of Pluto has this particularity, which that it is highly elliptical. So it is like this. It is not so too round. It is more elliptical. So when it is as if Pluto travels as far as it can, like outside the outside of the solar system, it gathers something, and then it when it comes back, it enters the Neptunian orbit. It goes inside the Neptunian orbit for some of its, or for some of its translation, yes, in its route. So it is as if it goes out and then it comes back inside. Um, so this is because Sol, this is of course a function, a solar function, because it is the ninth orbital of Sol. And this is because Sol needs to be anticipated to all the requirements of the express universe. Yes. So this is a function of anticipation. Because Sol is moving through the universe, so it needs to be anticipated to see what it needs to do once it gets to a certain place. And of course, keeps moving. Okay, so one orbit of Pluto is 248 terrestrial years. So what we have here is that we synced into the year where Pluto is going to be fulfilling its ninth orbit in terrestrial, like if we started measuring, of course, from year one of the Gregorian calendar, yes. So that's what we did. We multiplied 248 times 9, and this gives us year 2232, which is the Siva year of apparatus 558. So we are sinking into because this is a frequential connection. Yes. So it doesn't need to be ocurrido, physically ocurrido, for us to be able to anticipate, because we're talking about anticipation. We're sinking into something that's going to orient us to prepare for something that we don't know is going to happen. We can't know what is going to happen, because this is not about predicting. This is about sinking into a specific frequency with our antenna so that we have intuition and are able to prepare for when the challenge or whatever it is that we need to be preparing for, so that we're prepared for that. We don't know what it is. Um, so then Alejandra went on and looked for day 148, which is um, the end of the hydrogen bridge. Yeah, what or the promise that connects with the hydrogen bridge, which is 148, and that is the 27th of May of year 2232. And we find that the solar day of that is 815005. So we have a track, which is 81, a track that is able to be reset by the structure, or a structure that is able to be reset on the track. In the end, it is a structure that is being resetted in relation to the track. Um, so what we're doing here is that there is a provider of signal from the antimatter so that we are able to construct the resources in an anticipated way. So here are other metrics, Google Day, wheat. So here she mentions again, space-temporal structures are absolutely transparent, absolutely readable. It is an anticipatory language. It's because when we are talking about the fact that it is anticipatory in scales, in other scales that have to do with things that await us. It is not anticipatory in relation to our own appetites. No, because it is another range, it is another level. The educational signal educates, um, it is educating, but it is educating us in anticipation, uh, preparing us for our arrival and the requirements that we are going to need so that we are when we arrive at different point in space-time. Anticipation. So yeah, here she starts talking about Christopher Nolan, his movies. She's saying that a new stage of instruction for society is about to begin. So she's like, here's the show. We're gonna start talking entertaining society, but in the same measure that we are educating society, we have to entertain them because if they are not entertained, they don't learn. Um, so here we start talking about Christopher Nolan, and the metrics for this are really, really intense. Um, the whole development of Christopher Nolan and his movies have to do with how he has documented and expressed or put outside or described a specific mechanism of the manipulation of the subconscious of others. Mechanisms of manipulation. This is like, this is a component that is present in all of his movies. Um, and he makes it very evident. Like he has a role of documenting it in a very entertaining and artistic way. I just finished watching Inception again, and I was just like blown away once again. It is a really, really an amazing film. So much there to unfold. And now, like after watching it after everything that has been opened in the event, it's just really like I highly recommend it. Um, okay, so what we have here is Christopher Nolan's date of birth, and he was born in 1970. And we have the parabolic here, right? Parabolic antenna sending signals of the solar code. This is the reading that Alejandra gives to that. And then on the wheat is the collective use, the social use of the real time of life, real time of Earth. The real time of Earth used socially. That's the wheat. So when he was born, this is how many days had passed since the establishment of the wheat, which is 38424. And what we can see here is, hold on, it's not 428. Yeah, 248. And what can we relate this to? The 248 years that it takes Pluto to go around once, like 248 terrestrial years to go around one time in its orbit, right? So that we find that there in the metrics of Christopher Nolan in relation to the wheat. Also, another like one of the most important metrics we find is that the constant or the difference between when Nolan was born and the solar day of day 148 of year 2232 of apparatus 558, which is when Pluto completes its ninth orbital around the sun, which would be the ninth Plutonian year. The constant between those two dates, between Nolan and that date, is 95630. And what we have there is 90, and then we have 365 in the center. Okay. So 365 is the internal frequency of connection of the Earth, but then we have it in relation to the ninth orbital. In relation to the ninth orbital. Okay. So what this is telling us is that Nolan and that specific date and Nolan and the documentation of that date have a very clear and very close connection with the ninth orbital. This is what this metric is telling us. So the movies have to do about that, have to do with the like the clarification or the exposition, the sequentiation or explaining of how these mechanisms of manipulation of the masses work, the manipulation of the axis. So here she's just saying that she's very grateful for the people that have kept residence through time. It is something that is not very usual in society. It really doesn't exist. And the fact that we are able to have this detection with 13 years of anticipation gives us the capacity to create or form the wisdom. It gives us the capacity to generate the structures of the wisdom of the new knowledge of humanity, el nuevo conocimiento de la humanidad, the capacity to generate the structures of the new wisdom. That's what she's saying. So hard to recognize this. We can recognize it at a particular level. I think that's where it should be recognized. So why is it important that we have this construction or argumentation of the digital construction of the solar consciousness? Because it's going to allow us to have an anticipated perception of the analogical instance. We're going to be anticipated. Like things are not going to take us by charge all the time. Maybe we're still learning right now. We're probably still receiving all these kinds of things that we're not able to anticipate, but we can probably measure ourselves like SpongeBob and be like, oh, I think I have grown a little bit. Okay, so now, what perception do I have of an apparatus now? The word aparato adds, if we add the letters, it's 76. So, what perception do I have now of the apparatus? The apparatus is the way that we are able to synchronize with all of the frequencies of the solar code, and not only the ones that intercept the Earth. Synchronizing with all of the frequencies of the solar code, all of them. The apparatus is the instance that is going to help me digitally to add determined qualities to the antenna for the captation. The apparatus is going to help me add qualities to my antenna so that my captation is more and more robust and refined and specific. So that this doesn't happen that I receive everything and I make a salad. You make a big, big salad. What I want is to be refined, that my captation becomes more robust. I want to add new things to my antenna. Um, so the resources, uh, we have resources that we can use from the memory because, okay, yeah, that's one level. That's one level of resources. But when we are using the position of the primary unfoldment, I am receiving instruction from the express universe. And that is the only way that I can have anticipation. Enough anticipation to provide improvements to the solar code. Of course, if I am only in relation to the memories, I'm not going to have this connection with primary unfoldment, and I'm not going to have instruction to the express universe, I'm not going to have anticipation, and I'm not going to be able to add anything new to the solar code. So probably I'm going to be very frustrated. But also another thing that Alice says is like probably when their credit for whatever they're doing runs out, they'll start having the itch, the itch of development of subatomic scale consciousness. Hopefully. Okay, so there's Interstellar. She watches Interstellar. She doesn't really develop it too much. She talks a lot more about Inception and and following. I did watch both, and both of them have this very clear manipulative component. Very, very clear exposition of manipulate. Like I even felt manipulated. When I watched Following, I felt manipulated as an observer. But in the end, he, of course, shows all the mechanism. So it's really great. Um, Our consciousnesses inhabit a mute area, and that is a frequency that is not of this time. It's not of this time because we are talking about shifting and beginning this construction of a spatial consciousness. So a spatial consciousness is not a temporal consciousness. But this connection is something that is really hard to communicate. Or better said, there is no way that this can be communicated. It is an essential connection that is synced into, and it's frequential, frequency wise. So whomever is essentially connected to themselves acquires all of this space. Yes. So if I have all of this space, I can offer that to somebody else. So this is where she says, maybe in like a relationship, if there's somebody that is essentially connected to themselves, is able to provide a space, and for the other, it is as if I am providing time, like I am giving time to that other person, but actually what I'm providing is space. But they read it as time, and it's actually space. Um, yeah, so LGC provides a frequency so that we are able to gain a spatial function. And this is going to enable us to have more space for the observer, for the detail. More space for the observer. So here she clarifies, I thought this was really good, the relationship of 3 with 6. 3, if we talk about planet Earth, the planet is going to be documenting because it rotates, records, and stores. Rotates, records, and stores. Yes, as it moves through its orbit. So it is documenting whatever it's picking up from the solar radiation. But what is it that provides meaning to that documentation? That is 6. The reading that provides meaning is going to come from 6. which is what we call the system or the internal safeguard of the memories of the system. That's what's gonna provide whatever Earth is documenting. It's gonna provide that with meaning. Coherence. Okay, so now Nolan is about to publish The Odyssey soon. I think it's a couple of days from now. So we'll see how that goes. Another really important, interesting thing that happened is that in Inception, oh, also Oppenheimer, sorry. Yes, 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 yes. We work a lot with Oppenheimer. We work a lot with Following, Inception, and Oppenheimer. So in Inception, the person that is being interfered, incepted, his name in the fiction movie Inception is called Robert Fisher. But then when we go and watch Oppenheimer, his name is also Robert, and this is another person that is also interfered. But this is a person that is real. This is somebody that was real and that had real influence because he is called the father of the atomic bomb, which I would hate to be known that way. Hate to be known that way. But we do know that two atomic bombs were dropped on Japan, right? So we do use that measure of the first atomic bomb in Hiroshima. We do use it. Um, so all of Nolan's work has to do with interference. There's a lot of interest for the re of the other person. So in LGC, we also have this interest of the re of another person, but not to manipulate, but to generate a new matrix of communication and interaction between all of us, which is not the same thing at all. Um, okay, so the member of the species, as we know, the third dimension has the axiom or was created for the execution of the code and the documentation of the faults and failures, so that in another dimension, the improvements are instrumented. But if I am implemented in the third dimension and my processor is confused and I don't like to fail and I don't like flaws and defects, I'm going to be constantly rejecting whatever is going to amplify the reach for me. I'm going to be rejecting whatever is going to amplify the reach for me if I have my processor is confused, which is not the same thing as to reject something that is going to amplify the reach is not the same thing as generating membranes and setting boundaries to figure out the new mechanism of interaction with something. Because, like we said earlier, if we are dealing with an external influence that is not passing through the clave de sol, well, at least I'm able to identify that. So what I want to do is buffer that, generate a membrane, and deal with that in another area that is not as internal. Yes, so it's not the same thing to do that than to just reject it and not work with it and not give it any treatment. No, because if I'm in a scalar growth, I'm going to be interested in whatever influence is coming my way. I'm going to be interested to see what it's about. Um, And then he just talks about Peter Thiel, which is this really scary guy in AI. He wants to control the world. Not scary. I mean, scary in the sense that he's just working on things that are not very good for everyone because it's very manipulative. So what Alejandra says is like his name is Peter, and San Pedro or Peter, Saint Peter, has the keys to the heaven, right? So Ale's like Peter Thiel wants to be Saint Peter and he wants the keys to everything. The thing is that the people that have this kind of focus, which is very linear, they want to substitute with technology everything that they cannot develop with their consciousness. They want to substitute with technology the fact that they are crystallized in their consciousness. They cannot progress in their anti-material aspect. The thing is that we use that as a resource, as a trigger to progress in that interface between matter and antimatter. So we have a head start from him at least in that aspect. And that's it. Yeah. So just so you know, for the record, I captured this myself presently during the event. So these are my personal captures from the event. And there we are. We finished. Good, good, good. So yeah, do you want to say anything before we finish the recording?
Is that for me? It's funny what happens all the time when you speak about the events that I go into there again.
Oh, that
That
we
is really
it feels like we're back in there.
back in there in that same like
The frequency is
area.
like we tune
Yeah,
into it, right? Yeah,
into
that's
that.
I feel.
That is really different when compared to other readings you have with this one. It happens also. It
Mm.
happened also the last time, so that was really. But it was really great to go through everything.
And we
Yeah.
finished it because last time I think we only went halfway
Yes.
through it. So this time we were able to finish it. And yeah, we have day two and day three. Day two, I think it's a little less dense. I think day one is more dense, and then day two less, and then day three is less, more or
Yeah.
less.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Mm-hmm.
also less. I think less text.
Yeah, less text.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna end the recording and we'll continue talking to private. Okay, bye bye.